So, one of the things that I've been working on for this project is I've been implementing some of the strategies that Julie, Aaron, Jan, and I have talked about in our podcast and on our website. And one of the articles that Jan directed us to was an article called Ditch the Study Guide, Creating Short Films to Analyze Literature Circle Texts. And it's an article written by Rick Marlatt and published in the International Literacy Association's journal. So it's the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. And what this teacher talks about in this article is how he used filmmaking in his AP literature class to get students to analyze literature in a way that is different than the traditional AP literature essay. And so, what I did in my 12th grade honors classes is my students had just finished reading literature circle books. And so they were in the middle of writing a research paper, and I really didn't want to have them write yet another essay. And so I gave them this film project. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like this. I mean, I was a little bit skeptical at first. Some of the things that Marlett said in his article is that using film affords students the opportunity to interact with literature and one another in ways that resemble their daily communication. And in this particular honors class, I had pockets of students who were friends with each other, but they had never quite come to that point where they were working together cohesively. And I felt like we had really built a community. And so I wanted to try this as possibly an opportunity to do that. And in his article, he says that readers shape identities when given autonomy to approach textual study with agency, making connections and crafting interpretations through their own intrinsic engagement, as opposed to following prescriptive guidelines such as scripted study guides or rote-based comprehension quizzes. So this is the part where this opportunity kind of sold itself to me, because I had gotten kind of into this rut where I felt like students were just giving me the bare minimum of work. They were just kind of trying to get the grade and move on. And I really wanted them to do something where they could take ownership of their learning and be engaged in it. And so I presented this project to them after they had finished their literature circle novels. And I had groups that read all different kinds of novels. I had a group that read 1984, a group that read Fahrenheit 451, a group that had read the Poisonwood Bible, a group that had read I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, a group that had read Kindred. I had a group that read Untwine by Edwidge Danticat, a group that had read The Darkest Minds. So there were a wide variety of books represented in these literature circles. And I wanted them to be able to showcase what their books were about and what they were able to take away from reading these books. And so the first thing I did, I'm going to share my screen, is I presented them with the option or the assignment to start by designing a storyboard. So I gave them a very basic storyboard template. And their requirements were for the film was that it had to be a group film, it had to be 10 minutes long, and that the majority of the film had to be literary analysis. I told them that elements of the film had to be acted, elements had to have voiceover, and that they could have some still images in their films as well. So I had them start by storyboarding their film. Which was, and they just illustrated how the progression that they saw of the film, and they kind of wrote out the plan for how the film would develop. From there, I gave them a screenplay template. So I found this template online for free, and I just downloaded it and linked it to them. And what I liked about this template is that as the students go through it, it gives them tips in blue, and then it tells them how to write the screenplay in the parts that are black. And so it shows them how to insert action, how to insert dialogue, focus ins, focus outs, how to introduce characters, and then along the way, it gives them these tips. So they were free to use this template or they could choose their own. I left that option up to them. Most of the students chose to use this specific template. So we spent about 2 weeks total on this film project. They spent the first 3 to 4 days storyboarding, kind of planning out their screenplay, and collecting any kind of costuming or resources that they would need. And then they spent about a week filming. And one of the things that I loved during the filming process is how well my entire class kind of jumped in and helped each other. So one of the things I talked about was wanting to build that community of learners in my classroom, and I feel like this project really did that. Because in the middle of this filming, we had all kinds of disruptions that occurred. We had testing days, and we had days where some students weren't able to come to school because of some traffic issues. And so they were so eager and so excited about this project that they helped each other. So students showed up in films where and acted, and they weren't even in the group that read that book. That's just how helpful they were being. One of the other things I loved is that they took an office area on our hall and they set it up as their voiceover narration room. So there were about 6 kids that were in there for 2 or 3 days who would do voiceover narrations, and they would do them for their own books, and then they would do them for other people's books as well. So what they did that I thought was really, really, really great is they figured out what each other's strengths were. So they knew which students were really good at acting, and they took advantage of that. They knew which students had really great speaking voices, and they took advantage of that. They knew which students were really good at manipulating the audio and the visual and doing the tech side of the project, and they took advantage of that. That was one of the things that I was really worried about with this project, was that I didn't know enough about the tech to be able to help them very much. I knew the basics of how to use Canva, and Canva Studio, and I knew some of the bare basics of how to use Movie Maker. And what I learned very quickly is that they did not need my help at all with making film. As seniors, they were very familiar with using iMovie. I had students who found apps like Splice that made it really easy to patch video and audio together. I had students who used animation apps to, rather than have live action actors, they used this app that used animation to act out their scenes, and they did the voiceovers for it, and it was phenomenal. So once they were finished, they had about a day and a half to edit their films, splice them, and then to revise their screenplays as needed. And then on the last day of the project, we had this big viewing party, which was so much fun. It it was the day before spring break, so I brought in popcorn, I brought in sodas. We had, 8 or 9 10-minute videos to watch. We didn't get through all of them, but I was completely blown away by what my students were able to produce. Um, and I was not able to show them any kind of model for this particular project because it was the first time I'd ever done it. I was trying something that I read about in a scholarly journal that Jan mentioned. And so I pulled up this article and I showed them some of the pictures from one of the students mentioned in the article, his film project. But that was really all they needed. They took it, they ran with it, and they were able to do so much more than what I thought they would be able to do with this project. So when we talk about ways to kind of overcome this legislation of divisive texts, this was a home run for me. Putting students in groups, giving them options as for books to read, um, giving them books that have diversity, but books that are from a lot of different perspectives, and then giving them the freedom to be autonomous and to create their own projects through film um, was an incredible success in my classroom. And what I can tell you is that after watching these films, I heard a lot of kids say that, we're not in that particular group. Oh, I want to read that book now. Oh, that book sounds really good. What's it called again? Um, so anytime the kids get really excited about reading and get excited about a project, I am a happy teacher. And this particular project by Rick Marlatt was absolutely incredible. I do intend to hopefully use some of these videos in my research, perhaps next year. I've got consent letters signed from some of the students. I'm still waiting to get some back. Otherwise, I would have shown you some of the clips today. But this was an incredible opportunity for my kids. And Rick Marlatt really, really did some great research on this and some engaging research. So kudos to him. Thank you.